guys, so before we hop into today's video, I just want to quickly give a thanks and a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that has thousands and thousands of online classes and tutorials for creative and curious people either wishing to develop new skills or further educate themselves on old ones. It's a great way into setting yourself new creative challenges, productivity classes, and structuring some time a little bit to kind of set some new achievable goals. Skillshare also provides things like drawing, writing and journaling classes, which are amazing for people that may struggle with stress quite a lot. That doesn't only help with creativity but also can help create a new stress-free hobby that can help you a lot with mindfulness and to manage any stress that may be going on in your life. I've recently been absolutely loving their lifestyle classes. They're kind of my favourite ones on Skillshare, and particularly this one on everyday minimalism. For those of you who have followed me for a while, I'm not a minimalist, but I do like to kind of implement minimal values into my life, so this has been an amazing course with some really handy tips I'd never heard about before. And another one that I've been loving and following for a while is a daily art challenge for self-care. I just think this is a really cool concept anyway. I kind of got into art specifically for the self-care element, so I think it's a really cool thing that they give you like a 14-day challenge to kind of do that and put your mind to giving yourself some creative self-care, because creativity for me is the soul of self-care, so it's a really beautiful course. And my absolutely favourite over this last month has been the course for Revolutionary Self-Care to Embrace, Nurture and Grow Your Authentic Self by Chidera. She is amazing. I mentioned her in my last video and I've just kind of gone down a rabbit hole of watching videos about her since I got her book a few weeks ago. This specific Skillshare course is absolutely amazing. It's like everything that I stand for. It's just really interesting, so go and check that out if you'd like. Skillshare offers membership with meaning, so with their memberships you have the opportunity to connect with others, join supportive communities that are also interested in similar things that you are, and also it's a great way to connect with people during a time that feels very isolating and kind of help you inspire each other when inspiration feels so low at this time. Skillshare is giving away premium membership for the first 1,000 people who click the link in my description box down below to help you explore your creativity further, and after that it's only around $10 a month, so check out that link in my description. So whether you're looking to kind of fend off some boredom or focus on self-care a little bit or pick up old interests again, Skillshare has something for literally everybody, so go and check that out. With all that being said, thank you for Skillshare for being my constant support for my channel, and let's just hop right on with the video. Bye guys. Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Harmony Nice, and today I'm going to be talking to you about building trust within yourself and kind of getting better at trusting your intuition. I thought this would be a kind of interesting subject to talk about, as I have realised recently how much trusting yourself is important and how relevant it is to a spiritual or healing journey too. Getting better at trusting yourself and everything like that, and trusting what works best for you and trusting that you know what you need. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. I'm going to kind of talk about why I feel like we don't trust ourselves, and then kind of moving on to building trust with ourselves, and also kind of involving some of my personal experiences in the subject too. And my intention is to just help anybody that may be lacking in trust with themselves, and hopefully helping anybody kind of get to a more mindful place with themselves where they can start to understand themselves a bit more, take control of their thoughts a little bit more, and start to build inner trust with themselves more, especially if they have been taught not to trust themselves. So throughout my life, I have had issues with not trusting myself. I do really think the main reason that we don't trust ourselves is due to the society kind of normal thing, what kind of goes through in the media and passes through the media as normal. Not even just with like our appearances, but anything. You know, even at school, you're kind of taught that, well, I definitely was, for an example, taught that kind of there is certain types of things that you do as jobs, and then things that are kind of unachievable. Like being an artist or anything like that was not seen as a realistic job to have. As when I was younger, like all creative jobs were kind of off the chart unless it was going into being an art teacher or something like that. Like that was the only realistic art job that we were told was around when I was younger. So I think from a young age you are kind of taught to go against your natural instincts with things, you know, and maybe taught that the things that you are naturally interested in aren't necessarily what you should be going into. Especially as women, like women are definitely taught to trust themselves a lot less than men are. I actually read in the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which I've mentioned in previous videos because it is such a brilliant book. Girls are basically told from a young age to go against their natural ways of being. They are taught to kind of hide the kind of wild explorer side of themselves and kind of contain themselves a little bit more and start to kind of do everything in regards to finding a man, you know, just doing the whole like society norm things. I mean, men definitely get put in that position and they are also taught not to trust themselves on a lot of things too, like, you know, everybody is in society, but women are definitely taught to think of other people's opinions as greater or as their own. There's like an interesting chapter in the book where Glennon discussed how she would see the difference between her children, like her male child compared to her female child. I think she used an example of where she went into the room and asked them if they were hungry. The boys would all like answer individually whether they were hungry or not, and say, yeah, I'm hungry, whereas the girls would convene with each other before answering whether they were hungry and made like a group decision to answer whether they were hungry or not, instead of just trusting their kind of basic intuitions of like, am I hungry? And I'm also not saying that the men don't have a problem with trusting themselves, because I think in general society really does inflict on everybody not to trust themselves, but how women are really taught not to trust themselves and to kind of, you know, always be convening with other people or trusting other people's opinions more than you trust your own. You know, I do think society does teach us, and also it can be inflicted through like family and friends, that happiness is a one-way street and that everybody's ideas of like likes and happiness is the right way forward and it is the best way forward. And if you have grown up with insecurity for loads of different reasons, it can become a lot worse. And this may be like a parental thing, this may be like an experience thing, you may just not have ever built up confidence as a child or as a young teenager and just not know how to trust yourself. Like little things that I recognized of ways that I didn't trust myself when I was like a teenager is like the little things, like being like, you know, when someone asks you where to eat and you just go, oh, well, where do you want to eat, you know, and let them make the choice, even though subconsciously on some level you probably know where you want to eat for lots and lots of different reasons, you know, whether it be the way you were raised or through influence of the media to not trust yourself. You're told to go against your natural kind of wants and instincts or needs and kind of focus on the needs of others. I wanted to mention, if it wasn't obvious, that can be because you may have been taught that other people's needs should be put in front of yours, which obviously isn't right. If you have an overbearing parent as well, you can also find yourself lacking trust in yourself too, because you always rely on the opinion of your parents than you do relying on yourself for making choices and things like that. A lot of the time we are also taught that if we make mistakes, that those mistakes are going to be instantly hit with criticism, hatred, even though mistakes happen to everybody, and even though some mistakes that you make you kind of can't necessarily determine because it's the position that you have been put in, so therefore you go through life maybe fearing making mistakes. Or for an example, if you had a lot of expectations put on you throughout your life, you can also find it quite hard to trust yourselves because you're always trying to live up to those expectations constantly, and then start to kind of distrust yourself and do what other people think all the time without understanding that you can never ever make everybody happy. I spoke about this in my last video, but also when it comes to women not trusting themselves too, in society we are taught to hate confident women. Like women that are confident and like embodying their like beautiful higher self are purposely determined by people as being like annoying or being like more dislikable and things like that. So I think a lot of the time there is a stigma around trusting yourself, where I think like a lot of the time the way that confident women are presented through the media, that a lot of the time that when we think of confident women, we think of women being like arrogant or not taking on any new opinions or anything like that, whereas confidence has nothing to do with being open. If anything, if people are truly confident and truly love themselves, you usually are open to what kind of comes towards you and what and new opinions and fresh ideas and like comfortable with change and growth. That is another reason why people, I feel like, lack inner trust, is because it's presented in a lot of different like medias and stuff like that as being like stiff and rigid and not allowing in change, not allowing people in, not allowing new opinions in, whereas in reality that is not what inner trust is. Inner trust is simply knowing yourself well enough to know that your views are valid, just as valid as anybody else's. I feel like it kind of means that you are on the same level playing field as everybody else, even if people think they're above you, or society treats certain people like they're better than other people, to realize that we're all humans, we all share the exact same energy and we're all connected in some way, and to recognize that and trusting yourself to express yourself fully and being confident with your core self, not like an identity that you have been given or you've created for yourself, but just like your authentic self. And then all the other things you do to express yourself, you accept as a part of yourself too. If certain things don't feel right, you have like the courage to change them and to accept what you cannot change too. And also, inner trust doesn't mean listening to anxiety. It means listening to your intuition. A lot of people confuse the two, and that is totally okay. Like, inner trust is something that builds up slowly, I really feel like. For a while, I thought trusting yourself meant just like living in your skewed reality of things and like living in your anxiety and just being like, I must trust my anxiety right now. Like, I think this is the difference, is that trusting that your anxiety is telling you something and may not necessarily the actual what it's presenting itself as, if that makes sense. For an example, I used to get really anxious about like relationships in general. Like, I'd always go into a relationship thinking that people are going to cheat on me, and like even though I would like embody it and try not to express it to my partner, that anxiety would make me like lash out towards myself and be like, you're not good enough. I'd find it really hard to communicate with my partner because I didn't want to like express this feeling to them. Instead, what I would do is look at where that was coming from, because usually like and usually it just takes you thinking. And I'm not saying like don't trust your intuition if you feel like somebody's cheating on you either, but what I'm saying is it's not always presented as obvious. Like, sometimes you can have anxieties and they're presented as something, whereas in reality your anxiety is just trying to tell you something, trying to tell you that something is up and something isn't resolved. It could be something deep inside you that has nothing to do with the subject. For me, like, intuition felt very grounded. Like, when I would know something was intuition, I would sit and I would be with it and I just feel it and I know that it was intuition. It'd be calm, it'd be steady, it would like make sense. It felt like it was in like a wiser, emotionally like balanced part of my body, whereas my anxiety would be like up in my heart. It would be like making my heart beat, my head would be going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then I'd be like, okay, well maybe you need to stop and think about this before you're like, you know. There's tons of reasons why we don't trust ourselves there, you know, and I think there's definitely some like worth looking into. If you feel like there's any particular reason why you don't trust yourself, it's always good to kind of do some journaling about inner trust. There's probably loads of stuff that you can find online about journal prompts for inner trust. Like, not trusting myself for so many years was kind of relevant to everything that I just said. What I learned was to be anything other than myself. Everything that I thought that wasn't good enough, and everybody's like criticisms of me, I would take the unhealthy criticisms of me, I would take on my back and carry them. And also the compliments of me, like when people would give me like compliments, like for an example, when I got more into YouTube and like especially like a few years ago when I really wasn't well, I would listen to everybody's compliments of me and what everyone would like of me and feel like I couldn't move from that, and I would trust everybody else's opinions over mine. Like I would always be asking people what I should do, like how I should make these moves on things that were inevitably only going to affect me. I think Glennon Doyle mentioned in her Untamed book as well, decisions that are like only going to affect you, like inevitably only going to affect you, you should be making for yourself. I feel like we all know and we all have the answers to ourselves. And especially something that I've learned from like Ram Dass and Jack Cornfield is to look inside yourself whenever you're not sure in these things, to look inside yourself deeper. Weirdly enough, when I started to trust myself, because I was going through all these phases where the times that I actually started to trust myself was around my period. Every single time I have my period, I used to get like these extreme levels of emotion, really upset and like cry. Every time that would come along for like a year or so around my period, I would always be like, why do I feel like I'm not being myself? Like, why do I feel like I'm not like getting any better with therapy? Like, why do I feel all these emotions coming up? Why do I feel like my heart wants one thing but I'm going the other way? And it would always come around my period and I'd get really distressed. I'd blame it on my period. I'd always go, oh, it's just my period, like, you know, just forget about it. And that's kind of what women are taught to do, is they just go, well, they're just on their period, so they're like irrationally emotional. One time around my period, which was the start of my healing journey, which is what triggered my healing journey, I just thought to myself, like, enough's enough. And I was just like, these feel wrong, these come up every month, and every month is unbearable, and every month I do the same thing and I ignore it. How about this month I actually try to listen to myself? I actually try to listen to these emotions. Yeah, like on our periods, things can be like heightened. But like I said, like when you are anxious, it doesn't necessarily mean the thing that you're being anxious about. What it is telling you is that there is a problem and that there is something that is going on that is making you feel like explosive. It actually is a form of intuition. You can actually use your periods for psychic abilities and trusting yourself and trusting your intuition more. And like, periods are a powerful thing, baby. They're very, very powerful. But yeah, I just found that really interesting. And now every single time I have a period, I like try to journal my periods and stuff like that. Every time I have a period, I recognize what is going on emotionally and the frustrations that I feel. And I don't necessarily like act on all the frustrations that I feel, but I definitely mourn them and I feel them, and then I always end up working out like where those emotions are coming from. Like, why do you feel frustrated at the minute? So how do we begin building trust? So initially, I would say that when you start building trust, it's important to get to know yourself a little bit more. And I know this is kind of similar to what I spoke about in my last video. So I think it's really important to get to know yourself, like your true self, like your authentic self, and what you actually desire, what you want, your shadow self, inner child work. So for me, like what I did when I kind of started to listen to myself was a little bit more, is I kind of got to know myself. So I did some journaling, and I did some like serious like questions about what I actually wanted from life and what I felt like this problem was, and what like I felt like my intuition was telling me, and what I actually wanted, as opposed to what I felt like the life that had been kind of given to me was. You know, the life that I kind of felt like I was just like walking through aimlessly, as opposed to taking control of that, taking control of my mind and actually exploring who I was as a person, as opposed to always being focused on creating like a very specific identity. I actually got to know me and how I wanted things to be, and not just how I feel like things should look or how things should be. Yeah, and I really do feel like, I always say this, and you guys, I know, but meditation is such a good way of getting control of your thoughts. Like when I started my healing process, what I would do is I would go for a walk every single morning. When I came back, I would meditate, and that really helped me kickstart my meditation because I really struggled to meditate when I first started to do it. And I also think journaling is really good for getting to know yourself too, because I feel like it's putting all your emotions on like a bird's eye view that you can kind of view from like an outside perspective almost, and look at it and be like, is this truly what I want, or am I just telling myself that? Also, like working on shadow self is the emotions that I kind of project onto other people for specific reasons, and getting to know that kind of part of me that is angry, that is jealous. Again, when it comes to shadow work, there are so many like journal prompts, and I think with shadow work and inner child work, a good thing to start off with is doing some shadow meditation, some inner child meditation, and doing some inner child prompts and some shadow journal and some shadow work prompts. Sorry, I have some in my video that was a few videos back called daily practices or something like that. I can't really remember. A great book that I read, I feel like, for building inner trust with yourself is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is such an amazing book for so many different reasons, not even just for people that feel like they're creative, but I feel like for everybody it kind of helps you understand why you don't trust yourself and help kind of in gaining that trust for yourself. Another thing that I found did help me was kind of understanding my fear of like commitment to things, like my fear of getting better in a sort of way, because it was like all my soul wanted me to get better, but there was a part of me that was scared of having to put work in because I had been depressed in my teenage years as well, and kind of felt like I'd gotten over that. But what I didn't acknowledge is that I experienced some trauma in my late teenage years that I didn't acknowledge, and therefore I started to spiral again. But actually started to commit to healthy routines that I knew were good for my mind. It did help me trust myself a lot more because it kind of helped me understand that I was capable of doing these things like everybody else, because I'd always look at other people and be like, well, good for you that you can do this, good for you that you can like go and be happy and all of that. And then when I started to do these things, I was like, shit, like I can do these things too, like I can actually be happy too. So after you've kind of focused on the root issues of things, because I think it's really important to focus on and understand the root issues of things, and I'm not saying, and this won't come like quickly or easily, and it will come in like waves and phases, so you can't just understand the root of all your issues straight away. Like it takes time and acknowledgement and, you know, practice and stuff like that. But some like little things that I started to do, like had learned about, that I found really handy in gaining inner trust myself was, so firstly, stop lying to myself and other people, because I had always been so scared of telling the truth to people out of fear of them not liking me, out of fear of being devalued, and I didn't realize that at the time, like it was a completely subconscious thing. I would always kind of like try to like butter up people's egos and enable them a little bit to try to firstly feel safe and secure in that scenario, but also to make myself feel valued and get like, hopefully, I think again on a subconscious level, get some false sense of gratification from this person. Didn't put up any boundaries or anything, and then I found it very, very hard when I wanted to put up boundaries. I started to notice the type of people that I would adjust my personality around, or if I would just try to adjust my personality around to make myself funnier or something like that, and I kind of slowly did that little by little. And naturally you do lose people through this. This is like a natural process, but it makes room for more people. Like it makes room for people that respect boundaries. I think I just tried to slowly, gradually stop pretending that I don't feel things when I did feel things, and be more open and vocal about that, and it helps everything. It helps relationships, it helps friendships. You can do it in certain smaller ways that you feel comfortable in, and if you don't agree with something, you can say, hey, I don't personally agree with this. You don't have to be angry or stressed about it, because difference of opinion other than human rights is like normal and fine. I think a lot of the time some people that struggle with that and struggle with control don't like people that have different opinions to them. Sometimes I would say things to myself, or I'd even write stuff in my journal that I knew were kind of like a bit of a lie to myself. You know, I'd be like, I'm fine, like everything's fine. And in reality, my heart would be like, no, it's not. When I stopped doing that, it actually allowed me to get clearer perspective on what needed tackling within my life and to not be scared of making those changes. Which then also made me value myself more, because I was like, hey, I'm worth more than the shitty situation that I'm in right now. Like, even if I may have put myself in it, I'm worth more than that, and I can get myself out of it. And even if you're not sure about these things, you can reflect on it. That is kind of what meditation, one of the amazing things that meditation is used for, is to reflect on these things. Same with journaling and tarot and so many different like spiritual practices, is to reflect on these elements of your life that maybe you really feel strongly about but you try to hide because you're kind of afraid of it or not ready for it. And you can reflect until you know you can take your time. You're allowed to take breaks and then create healthy space with people if you want to, and just reflect on your emotions for a little bit. You don't have to instantly jump into being like, I'm gonna trust everything I do. It's a slow, gradual process. Something that I really felt helped me trust myself more was being open to change. And it's very hard to relinquish the idea of being you and just being you and like not letting in any change. Like, a lot of the time people get into the head and identify themselves as so many different things. You know, they identify themselves, you know, as mothers, as wives, as husbands, as teachers, as like YouTubers, you know, like people have all these identities that they kind of cling on to very tightly. And they build their whole life around their specific identity. I think when I realised and I came to an accepting place with change, that really helped me just understand that I am just like a soul. So deep, but I'm just like a soul existing, and to see my life and see the moment as it truly is, and see how this idea of identity that we build up for ourselves is so, firstly, not real, and secondly, like how every moment is just a new moment brushing in on us, and how like this is just the reality of it, is that there will never be another similar moment again. Like, everything is always constantly changing, and it's so good to be open to change, because then you don't feel like this attachment to identity and then don't have a freak out when that identity is jeopardized, and you're just able to kind of flow and naturally adapt. Be able to take on people's opinions without taking them to heart, and also making change where changes need to be made, and like leaving the rest behind. Like, there's this quote that Jack Cornfield says that he always says at the start of his podcast, or mostly says at the start of his podcast, where he says, take what you find beautiful here today and leave the rest behind. And that is like a rule that I have for life, is I always try to be open to listening to other people's views on things. I take what's beautiful and I leave the rest behind. I might understand it differently in the future. It might come to me and I might be like, yeah, okay, I get that now. I might never understand. But that's like a great rule for like when you're like, well, you know, I don't know what to do about when I have change in, because I want to trust myself, but I don't know how to let change in. And that's like a great rule for that, or a great teaching for that. Usually your heart knows as well. Like, so many choices that I have made in my life that have been because I feel like I have to, or I should do. You know that quote that says, you've made your bed, now lie in it? Like, I don't think that's a good quote for life at all. I think commitment is important, but I think also if you start to commit to something and it really doesn't feel right, then you can change it. You can work that out for yourself. I trust in you that you can do that. But your heart usually knows. There are so many scenarios that I've gotten into, or that I have been in, where my heart is going, this is wrong, you know, and but I ignore it. And also I don't believe that everything you want you should have, because sometimes our wants can be unhealthy and based through cycles and patterns and teachings that we have been taught that aren't healthy for us. but I think like our heart truly knows what we actually want and what we actually truly need, you know, as opposed to like things that we do to self-sabotage and things like that. Like, and I feel like once you identify them, it's a lot easier to kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna start making more healthy, conscious choices for myself, and because I deserve to be happy. And I feel like your heart knows that. It's weird, it's like a feeling that like that wise intention within you is going, yeah, this is the right choice. And whenever I'm unsure, I just sink down into myself a little bit and go like, okay, like how do I actually feel about this? You know, I just sink down and I go like, do I actually want this? Like, you know, or am I doing something that is jeopardizing myself because I'm scared, you know? And you slowly learn to do that. And this book is something that's really good for helping with things like that, as well as therapy if you can afford it or you're in a position to get it. But if not, journaling and doing things like this can be a really amazing tool to use too. Like, and a lot of the time, funnily enough, my therapist would often say to me like, why don't you trust yourself? Because every single time you don't trust yourself, you end up being right. So why don't you trust yourself? Because usually when you trust yourself, you know you're right, and the choices that we make that are maybe less wise always seem to reside in anxiety or fear, and your heart truly knows what you actually want. Where however you kind of find that when you sink into yourself a little bit more, you start to discover what is going to help you get there. To understand that your fears other people's fears are not yours, other people's anxieties are not yours, and your journey is your own, and what things may look like to somebody else may not look the same way for you, and to trust that. Great thing if you're kind of finding this all a bit like, oh, overwhelming, or maybe you aren't quite on board with some of these ideas. It's great to do anyway, even if you do like the sound of everything else. It's just make small choices that you wouldn't normally make. To analyze during your days where, you know, you're given a choice, you're presented with a choice, somebody goes, what do you want? And you go, oh, I don't know, whatever you want. Instead of doing that, to just go, this is what I want, you know, like actually think and go, like, what is it? It's the worst that somebody can go is, oh, actually, I don't want that at the minute. And you can go, okay, well, how about this? Or you can say, well, you know, and then present them with their choice, you know, and if you're like, oh, I don't want that, you can also say, I don't want that. You know, for little things like with food, your clothing, activities that you do, your job, choices that only affect you especially, and so like little as well, you know, just like really, really small ones. Jobs are obviously like a little bit bigger, but like, again, going back to that quote that people say, like, you know, you've made your bed, now lay in it. I don't think that's true at all. I think you can mess up the bed, you can friggin' change the sheets, you can do anything you want until you find a place that you are comfortable and happy in. And it might take a while to get there, but you can do that. I don't think it's true at all. You know, if you have a job that you really hate and you know your heart wants to do something else, you may not be able to quit straight away, but there's definitely things that you can do to work towards having that, you know, like these things aren't easy. I think people think that healing is like a make this choice, make this choice, make this choice, and it's just so easy. Sometimes things are like that within healing, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes it takes years of unlearning something or years of trying to get somewhere else from a place that you are in. Learning to trust yourself is a huge part of healing. Learning to just trust your intuition is a huge part of healing. And so many things that I felt so like entrapped in my brain about a year and a half that I was like, I literally thought to myself, I'm 22 and I have ruined my life. I thought that all my choices were so fucked that I was just like, there's no way I'm getting out of this place that I'm in right now. I'm destined to be unhappy, and that is not true at all. Cancel that. That's not a truth that will ever be. Even if you've made choices that you're really not happy with, you can change. You can make these decisions for yourself and learn to trust yourself through those choices and believe that you are a good and happy person. Yes, that is the video for today. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed. It's a bit of a long one today, but it's quite a big subject, to be honest with you. I'm really glad that I got to sit here and share this energy and this time with you, and I hope you got something out of this video about building inner trust with yourselves. There are so many different things that you can do to build inner trust that aren't mentioned in this video, and we all learn at different levels and rates, and it can be quick or it can be slow, but it just takes like a little push into it. So I hope you got something out of this video. Lots of love to everybody. I hope you're all having an amazing day. It's sunny today, so I'm gonna go walk outside and get a coffee and a cinnamon bun and just hang out for a little bit. I love you all so much, and I will see you guys in my next video.